The next morning, I went down to breakfast in a room other than the formal dining room. It was more like a cafeteria with lots of tables and a buffet-style array of food presented on a massive table with access all around it. This was where whomever was staying at Castle Seltradit would come for sustenance. People were active around the clock, which made it always seem busy. People training for the circus, their trainers, Uncle Sandu's staff, Floren's staff, or even the crew making costumes, all had to be fed. I brought my yoga mat with me and joined Dick and Dr. Sue on the terrace for our morning constitutional. "You've converted her, Dick," I said, to which he replied, "Yeah, if I can get her to take her face out of the book, it's a good day." To which she replied, "I'll pretend I'm focusing and ignore that." Dr. Sue was obviously enjoying herself in this environment. I stayed for about half an hour enjoying the sun and breeze as my focus and readied myself for the great day of exploration that lay before us. Magda had offered to take me into the forest to find the type of trees I was looking for to take core samples from, and I accepted. Trees in temperate regions undergo an annual cycle composed of a growth period and a dormant period. They produce their foods to carry on respiration and other physiological processes, but anything left over is used for growth. That varies between good years and bad years, environmentally speaking. Analyzing that information is just a big data question, because if you capture enough data, you can extrapolate the good years from the bad regionally and adjust formulas to estimate dates. The science of dating trees is called dendrochronology, and Errol and I have been considering the trees in Tasmania as a future business after we get our M.Bio degrees and need to support the Tasmanian devil research. The tool used to take core samples is known as an increment borer, designed with a bit, a handle, and an extractor. The cores can be analyzed by gas chromatography, but that solution is not available for amateur collectors like me. My goal is to build a collection so I can study the DNA of various trees someday and determine climate change throughout the world. The length of the core should be at least the outermost 10 centimeters, not including the bark. That length was required to identify contaminants. Of course, larger trees require longer and thicker core samples. Errol told me some of the largest and oldest trees in the world could be found in Tasmania. For 2 centuries sailors felled those trees to build large ocean-going ships requiring masts. Such were the ships of the early explorers. Large trees generally take their sustenance from the top of the tree and deliver it down rather than trying to pump it up from the roots. That allows them to reach phenomenal heights like the giant redwoods of California, which can have highways built through them. There are trees that communicate with their young as they grow. They send out networks of roots that encourage their growth. Researchers in the Canadian Northwest have documented root networks of more than a kilometer that allow the parent to take more than a passing interest in their offspring. A tree can do that. That's more mothering than many humans receive. I found myself collecting core samples from trees that I thought were more than 100 years old, or at least big enough to get a long core sample that would let me observe the rings with the naked eye or a magnifying glass. It occurred to me that every living thing has DNA. Surely the most important DNA is humans, so that we can solve mankind's problems. But if all things have DNA, we need to consider what's been here the longest and can tell us the most about what's happened since they arrived. Perhaps my schooling was influencing my train of thoughts, but that's what it should do. I considered the 5 or 6 kingdoms of life on Earth as science knows them. Putting aside minerals and elements and things we don't know, the living things we do know are animals, plants, fungus, protozoa, and bacteria. Bacteria can be further broken down, I guess. Considering the animals first, which one lives longest? These things are easily researched, but scientific conclusions don't always reflect opportunities offered by escalating new technology. As a child, I thought Darwin's tortoise was the oldest thing in the world until I found another creature like the Great Lake sturgeon, whose average lifespan exceeded 150 years. Eventually I settled on the whale as my favorite to take the place as the longest living creature on Earth. I found that to test the age of a whale, fluid must be gathered from the eye within a very short time of death. The fluid provides science with an ability to estimate when it was created. Science tested one particular whale's fluid, which turned out to be over 250 years old. By all other medical indications, the whale was a middle-aged adult. Whales have been captured with stone axes embedded in their flesh. When was that attack made? Currently it's estimated that the Greenland shark could be 500 years of age or older. If you move past mammals, you find clams and corals over 300 years. To find anything older, you may have to consider glass sponges at 10,000 years and a couple of potentially immortal individuals like Turritopsis dohrnii, known as the immortal jellyfish, or a group known as hydras. Certainly, those guys can be killed, but if left to their own devices, who knows how long they could survive. That led me to wonder how long it takes for a DNA change to display itself to the rest of us. Darwin's hummingbirds or finches didn't burst out of an egg one day with a beak twice as long as its siblings. His mother gave him a little bigger beak than his brother, hoping that he would pass this longer beak on to his prodigy, and they could all drink the nectar of a very specific flower that tasted better than any other nectar in the world. If the new look is fancied by the opposite sex, required to create those prodigy, then Mom will be proven right. That presented me with 2 further questions. How did Mom modify her DNA upon recognizing the opportunity before passing it along, and how long will it take until her great-grandbabies start showing signs of having those really massive bills? I don't think Mom knew how to do it consciously, but something in her DNA understood that a longer bill, or one of the other concurrent modifications Darwin was observing, would be better for her peeps. Perhaps the ultimate goal of a nice long beak came to her in a dream, but beaks like that don't happen overnight. How does the next mom know to keep ramping up the beak length identifier in her DNA and eventually when to stop before that beak starts preventing her offspring from leaving the ground? The DNA of grandma must be modified again and then passed on. That's why Errol and I are looking into CRISPR and Mega, because humans will be looking to skip all those generations so that mom can give the very next generation beaks to be proud of. Those little darlings will be drinking the best nectar in town in no time. But should we? Enough people will be asking themselves that question in the future that eventually someone will say, hell yes. So much for animals that currently top out at around 500 years, but what about plants? Plants can live thousands of years. Imagine a tree dropped a seed the same day Cleopatra and Mark Antony tied the knot. That tree dropped a seed to create its first prodigy before Nero played a single note on that fateful night. The tree had different DNA than its parent who was still living next door. In fact, they both kept dropping seeds carrying their personal DNA changes on for the next 1,000 years. Errol told me that a Huon pine in the Lake Johnston Nature Reserve in Tasmania is believed to be part of a stand of trees and clonal colony that dates to over 10,500 years ago. In the Wollemi National Park, the only known stands of Wollemi pines grow. They recently discovered Wollemia nobilensis, which is an ancient conifer-like tree unlike anything scientists have ever seen before. Through the rise and fall of thousands of human races, that ancient tree that dropped the first seed may still be living happily next to a prodigy of thousands of DNA modifications. Do I know you? You look different. Are you one of mine? The older tree may ask the younger tree. Don't flower yourself, Gramps, the younger might reply. What is fast and what is slow when you consider changing DNA? DNA provides instructions on how to take the carbon pieces supplied in the box and assemble them to create your very own tiger, mushroom or human. The bigger kits would probably come in a wider selection. If Lego made God kits, they would cost more, and if Steve Jobs made God kits, they would be proprietary. Ooh, that thought sent another shiver down my spine. As I was contemplating the universe, Magda finally arrived. What kind of plants would you like to see? We have cow parsley, as you can see. She pointed at a plant on the ground. They call it devil's parsley because it looks like a hemlock, but this one can break your mother's heart. I smiled and she said, don't you believe in magic? I've seen and heard things I can't explain, but calling them magic wouldn't help explain them. I said. Knowing what plants can do to other living creatures can seem like magic. Chamomile tea to calm, feverfew for a migraine, or white horehound to cure a cough. Is that magic or science? Then she continued, what if I gave you an amulet with herbs and a spell incantation on it and told you what it would do for you and it did it? Quote. As we walked, she stopped and pointed at a tree. That's the blackthorn tree, which is referred to as the witch's tree. A blackthorn walking stick pointed at a pregnant woman or animal was said to cause immediate miscarriage, or cause crops to wither. That would make an interesting core for your collection. I agreed with her, although some might not be big enough to core, but I could get a DNA sample. The DNA of the tree would be of interest to me someday. Folk tales can often shine a light on disguised science. I began to prepare for the process of taking samples while Magda scouted around for other blackthorns worthy of our attention. You should also take core samples of the elder trees, they are mystical. Each elderflower has 5 petals, 5 yellow stamens, and 5 sepals which form a tiny green star. It's associated with superstition surrounding the number 13. When she pointed one out to me, I had a flashback to all those movies I saw at boarding school where evil things lived in or under trees. This was the tree they lived under. The berries and the leaves are both rich in vitamin C. The leaves can be made into eardrops to treat pain and inflammation. The flowers make a tea that is good for treating coughs and irritable throats. It can be made into a skin cleanser and lotion. The bark of the small new twigs can be made into a laxative. The bark, roots, berries, and leaves can all be used as dye. And the berries are good for making jam, wine, vinegar, and syrups. She informed me. That's quite a tree. I said. Rowan is another magical tree that gives protection against malevolent beings. You must of course have the proper species of rowan, Sorbus orchiparia. Some plants grow as epiphytes on a larger tree. They don't hurt the tree but join with it. These particular plants are a strong counter-charm against sorcery. The tree was also called the traveller's tree because it prevents those on a journey from getting lost. It was said that this was the tree the devil hanged his mother on. Another involuntary shiver. We finished collecting cores well after lunch and decided to head back and get something to eat. Wait a minute, let's see if you believe in magic. She bent down to a plant was growing beside the stream. Her hand caressed the leaf, and she blew on it. In seconds the flower opened up to its full glory. Now you try it. I bent down and touched the leaf and then blew on the flower. Nothing happened. She took my hand in hers and said, try again. I reached down to the leaf and touched it. This time I felt a tingle, but it was not something I could label. I drew a breath and then exhaled onto the plant and could almost see my breath. To my amazement, the flower opened to its full glory. That was incredible, Magda, how did you do that? And she replied, I didn't do it. You did. I just helped, and the mystery was left there for now. We enjoyed the rest of our stroll back to the castle. We met with the others in the lounge where they were working on finding, deciphering, and translating the text that had the keys we were looking for. Ian decided to attend just for the briefing before going on to his project. Sandy and Richard were there with Cheesy, Dala, Uncle Sandu, and Krista. Sandy began by saying, let's consider the great sages of India over time because they were the ones writing the epoch texts. Perhaps one of them may have encountered the information we are looking for and created a story about it that will provide us with some clues. The bottom line, of course, is we're looking for any Sanskrit text. But for perspective, let's start first with Kashyapa, one of the ancient Saptarishis, son of Rishi Marichi and father of the Devas, Daityas, Danavas and all humankind. Krista asked, who are the Saptarishis? Sandy replied, the Saptarishis are known as the 7 sages or 7 rishis of ancient India. They appear in many places in the Vedas and other Hindu literature. The earliest list of the 7 rishis is given by Jaiminiya Brahmana, but the list changes in different epochs. I compiled a list of known rishis that you can go by in the handout, but there are many. We're looking for any Sanskrit, but if you happen to see a reference to one of these names in another language, it could be very relevant. The Big Dipper is called Saptarishis and the 7 stars represent the 7 rishis. There is, however, another star slightly visible within the Big Dipper, known as Arundhati. That's the morning star and it's known as Alcor, which forms a double star with Mazar in Ursa Major. Arundhati and Vashishta were married, and together formed the Mazar double. Vashishta is regarded as the epitome of chastity, conjugal bliss, and wifely devotion. The 7 rishis changed from Manvantara to Manvantara. Cheesy interrupted, that's not a term we've heard before. Sandy said, quite right. Let's take a step back for a moment and consider the concept of time from a metaphysical Hindu perspective. And Dala interjected, the metaphysical is our area of expertise. And she glanced at her sisters who were very much interested in what Sandy was saying and smiling perhaps a bit too much. Sandy began with his explanation of the yugas by saying, a yuga is an epoch of time. The Rig Veda refers to a yuga as generations, or a long period or very brief period, or a yoke. In the Mahabharata, the words yuga and kalpa are used interchangeably to describe the cycle of creation and destruction. But these seemingly different and confusing terms are all part of what is known as the Chatur Yuga cycle. Chatur Yuga is a cycle of 4 world ages known as the Yuga cycle and are comprised of smaller sections known as Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. Together they form a full Yuga cycle. A complete Yuga cycle is considered an epoch in Hindu cosmology, with each Yuga cycle representing 4,320,000 earthly solar birthdays for you and me. That's a lot of candles on our cake even for leap year babies. The Yuga cycle continues through the 4 Yugas in a linear manner once the previous cycle is complete. Through each Yuga, humanity's general moral and physical state decrease by 1/4 as does the length in time successive Yugas last. Time moves in a linear fashion through each of the cycles and through time in general. Within each cycle there is a dawning period of the age equivalent to 1/10 of the overall time of that Yuga. Then as the Yuga approaches its end, humans move to dusk that lasts 1/10 of the time. Kali Yuga, being the last of the 4 Yuga cycles, has only 432,000 years to exist. For current humans, that countdown started in 3102 BCE if you wish to set your timepieces. Near the end of this Kali Yuga, when human virtues are at their lowest, a cataclysm will re-establish a new Dharma, or a new right way of living. The next full Chatur Yuga cycle will begin with the ushering in of the dawn of a new Satya Yuga. This is prophesied by Kali. As the great sage Swami Cheesy Ji said, humans lived a lot longer then as well, didn't they? Cheesy asked. Sandy continued on, that's right Swami Cheesy Ji. Human life was on average 100,000 years under Satya Yuga, declining to the 100 years we see humans live today in Kali Yuga. 1,000 Yuga cycles is just one divine day on the wristwatch of Brahma, so it's natural humans lived longer as well. I say, is, because that time will come again. I started considering the math in my head. A Manvantara lasts for 306,720,000 years and is built from 71 Chatur Yuga cycles. There are 14 Manvantaras in a Kalpa, which is one divine day. During the connecting periods the Earth is reset by submerging it underwater as the ocean's level rises to accommodate the melting glaciers and the northern landscapes are scrapped clean. It's as if the gods must flush the Earth between Chatur Yugas. Between particularly caustic cycles Brahma might be heard to say, "Oh me. I was sitting on a monkey tail." Flush. These gods had a lot of time on their hands. Ian said, to which Sandy replied, they needed it because in each Manvantara they required 7 new rishis, assorted deities, an Indra, a Manu, and kings to be the sons of Manu so that they could all be created and then perish. Each Manvantara is distinguished by the man who reigns over it. We are currently in the 7th Manvantara of 14. This one is ruled by Vaivashvata Manu. For this particular period, the rishis include Markandeya, a devotee of both Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva and the author of the Markandeya Purana. Markandeya was one of the Chiranjeevi, a group of immortals that lived through the entire Chatur Yuga cycle. The other Chiranjeevi are Asura King Mahabali, Parashurama who is the 6th avatar of Vishnu, Vibhishana, Hanuman whom we know as the monkey warrior, Vedvyasa, Kripacharya, and Ashwathama. Patanjali, the great sage, whom most of you know from the Yoga Sutras, is the father of yoga. There are others considered fathers in their field such as Kapila, the father of cosmology who was born to the illustrious sage Kardam and Devhutt. He represents the Sankhya school of thought, and Cheesy jumped in, yoga school with God. That's right, Cheesy, nature and principles of the ultimate soul, primal matter and creation. Purusha, the divine realm, and Prakriti, this earthly existence. Kapila's concept of the transformation of energy and profound commentaries on Atman, non-Atman and the subtle elements of the cosmos could prove to be a valuable line of thinking. He may have understood what we call vital force and perhaps created tantras to build or increase it within the mortal self. The Atman is eternal, it's not part of body, soul or consciousness. Let's see if we have anything by Kapila and get it to Richard as soon as possible. Cheesy added, that would be too big a coincidence. Nevertheless, you won't see his name printed in English on the cover. The handout I gave you has the equivalent Sanskrit characters that you will need to identify the various sages of particular interest. Kapila asserted that Prakriti, with the inspiration of Purusha, is the mother of cosmic creation and all energies. Sandy continued, Sushruta, born to sage Vishwamitra, is the father of surgery. He conducted complicated surgeries such as caesarean births, cataracts, artificial limbs, rhinoplasty, 12 types of fractures, 6 types of dislocations, urinary stones, even plastic surgery, and brain surgery. Sushruta's book, Sushruta Sawita, describes over 300 surgical procedures and 125 surgical instruments like scalpels, lancets, needles, catheters and rectal speculums designed from the jaws of animals and birds. Ian said, those are such amazing feats when you consider when in time and location he performed them. Even at the time they were written down, it would have been phenomenal. He may have accomplished many other things he didn't reveal to the public. Sandy continued, then consider Acharya Karika, who is known as the father of medicine. The Karika Sawita is an encyclopedia of Ayurveda, a lifestyle diet still popular in India today. His work includes human anatomy, embryology, pharmacology, blood circulation and diseases like diabetes, tuberculosis, and heart disease. He described the medicinal qualities and functions of more than 100,000 herbal plants. Magda might be able to help with that one based on her knowledge of plants and herbs. I volunteered. Karika emphasized the influence of diet and activity on mind and body. He proved the correlation of spirituality and physical health contributed greatly to curative sciences. Karika also prescribed an ethical charter for medical practitioners prior to the Hippocratic Oath. Acharya Bharadwaj authored the Yantra Sarvashva, which included discoveries in aviation science, space science and 3 categories of flying machines, one on Earth from one place to another, one that travels from one planet to another, and one that travels from one universe to another. Ian quipped, we should give that one to Tesla. Sandy continued, Aryabhata was a master astronomer and mathematician who wrote the Aryabhatiam, an unparalleled treatise on mathematics and astronomy where he formulated the process of calculating the motion of planets and the time of eclipses. He was the first to proclaim that the Earth was round, rotates on its axis, orbits the Sun, and is suspended in space. What took Copernicus so long? Throw in a solution for pi to 4 decimal places, the sine table of trigonometry, the concept of zero, and Aryabhata had a long day even with a good work ethic. Kanada was the founder of atomic theory, one of 6 principal philosophies of India, and a pioneer of realism, and the law of causation. He classified all the objects of creation into 9 elements, earth, water, light, wind, ether, time, space, mind and soul. Ian suggested, this is our ether trail again perhaps. Sandy continued, every object of creation is made of atoms which in turn connect with each other to form molecules. His statement ushered in atomic theory for the first time in this world. Bhaskaracharya calculated the time taken by the Earth to orbit the Sun hundreds of years before anyone else. In the Siddhanta Shiromani, he talks about planetary positions, eclipses, cosmography, mathematical techniques, and astronomical equipment. Adjustments are required to today's sky to recreate the sky you would have seen so many years ago. This is easily accomplished with software that can reposition the sky to any time frame required. To calculate the position of those celestial bodies, you would have to reset the cosmos to what it looked like 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, or even perhaps a full Yuga cycle ago. We have the software to do this, but astronomical events happen in cycles, so the events described in the Mahabharata, for instance, may have happened every 1,000 years. Experts have compared many of the events, and dates could vary from 3,500 BCE to 9,500 BCE, or even much longer considering Yuga cycles. Oceans were rising and glaciers were shrinking in 9,500 BCE as that ice age was in recession. Bhaskaracharya made note of the force of gravity. Objects fall on Earth due to a force of attraction by the Earth. Therefore, the Earth, planets, constellations, moon, and sun are held in orbit due to this attraction. He was the first to discover gravity, hundreds of years before Sir Isaac Newton had his pendulum swung by the apple. Panini was a sage known for his Sanskrit grammar, particularly his formulation of the 3,959 rules of Sanskrit syntax and grammar known as Ashtadhyayi. If you find anything by Panini, give it to Richard right away because it changes the grammar and meaning of words through time. Everything has several names in Hindu mythology, and Sanskrit is localized text based on region. Varahamihira's book Panchsiddhanta noted that the moon and planets are lustrous not because of their own light, but due to sunlight. In the Brihad Sawita and Brihad Jatak, discoveries in the domains of geography, constellations, science, botany, and animal science are outlined. In botanical science, he presents cures for various diseases afflicting plants and trees. If in our search we stumble onto something else earth-shattering, we certainly won't throw it away. I'm looking so forward to being a trailblazer, Richard voiced sarcastically. Uncle Sandu added, you might be wondering why we've not just gone into a room of shelves and taken whatever texts we have off the shelves. The cell-traded libraries have existed for many centuries and have accumulated many documents and larger items that have never been catalogued for one reason or another. You will go into rooms in the basement levels that no one has been in for perhaps hundreds of years. In those rooms there are chests, boxes, bags, and letters from important figures in history. Treat the documents with care and try to keep the notes of where you found things so we can follow up and appreciate what we have here. If possible, we will try to match the item to a log entry in the diaries which will provide background information. I'll be here in this room, so any documents you find I will look at immediately. Richard told us, and then off we went to search the castle. It seemed quite an adventure at first, but at night it was a whole lot creepier in retrospect. We spent the day looking through rooms in the first basement with flashlights while wearing gloves and masks. It was dank and dusty in rooms off halls that seemed to go on forever. Plaques appeared over doorways, wrought iron gates blocked passages, and it seemed like a tunnel system or a dry sewer system that was built to confuse the wanderer. Dala and I found a box with Sanskrit text containing documents with images and symbols unfamiliar to us. The box was taken to Richard, but he needed time to determine what the text revealed and if it was of any use to us. One thing for sure, these were unique documents unknown by any scholars of this time. I was more than ready to get cleaned up and have something to eat by the end of that first day. When I got to the dining hall, I saw Cheesy and the Jacks just finishing their meals. They told me they would be in the lounge later if I was interested in joining them. Everybody had a busy day, so they were also making it an early night as I dropped by the lounge. Marius was explaining to Dick, that's the cell-traded way. Skills and knowledge. The skill can be split into body, to perform the skill, and knowledge stored in the mind, to know and execute the skill. You won't see an overweight cell-traded here, because physical fitness is the first step in the process. We have a great gym where people keep fit or train for their circus acts. All cell-tradeds, from the moment they can crawl, are brought to the gym to enjoy exercise and enjoy family. Yoga has really caught on here since Marion and I came back from India last year. You probably saw a few people on the terrace with you this morning. Learning new poses, positions, transitions, chants, it's great. It doesn't take a lot of room, so during travel time on the train it's ideal. Everyone spends a lot of time on the rail with the circus. We have 3 trains running on 3 different Soviet track systems, as well as the Riviera Arena and Casino that require a big, healthy, happy family. There was that family image that I was unfamiliar with again. Marius continued, the skills use the body but come from the mind and are not only the blueprint for the task at hand, but the access to the raw materials of knowledge required to construct it. You may have the plan in your mind through synthesizing cognitive inputs, but you must also find the information you have stored in your mind if you wish to execute upon those inputs. Take Cheesy for instance, he has an eidetic memory, so the step of mapping the storage device so he can retrieve that information is very well developed. Marius told us. It's true, I can remember facts and envision everything around those facts once I start looking. I like to add more facts rather than contemplating the ones I already know and how to use them. Marion says it's a journey. I'm working from the other side to him, and we're going to meet in the middle. Cheesy revealed. Marius continued, but knowledge is only half the equation of a complete solution. What's the solution that knowledge is going to apply to the problem to create the desired outcome? The current stimuli must be examined to contemplate a possible solution. It's the AI of the brain that synthesizes the knowledge it contains to make the connection. Then he continued, so we try to figure out at an early age what type of mind the child prefers and work to strengthen both. That's where the huge library we have here comes into play. The cell-tradeds have been building knowledge for centuries. You work harder on something you have a passion for. Cheesy turned to me and said, now do you know why I want to learn how to build the perfect eye? Quote. And I did. The next morning after breakfast and yoga, I joined Ian, Uncle Sandu, Dick, April, and the Jacks for Dr. Sue's introduction to Russian phages. Although I was taking microbiology, I was just a student compared to Dr. Sue, who had been in the field for more than 5 years working closely with pathogens and their transfer to humans. Let's start with bacteria, a single-celled organism found almost everywhere on Earth and vital to the planet's ecosystems. Most bacteria in the body are harmless and some even helpful. A relatively small number of bacteria species are pathogens that cause disease. We have 10 times more bacterial cells in our body than we have human cells. What exactly is considered a pathogen? Marius asked. A pathogen is any organism that can cause disease in its host. Therefore, a pathogen can come in the form of a virus, a bacteria, a fungi, algae, or as a unicellular or multicellular eukaryote. Unicellular eukaryotes are organisms getting by with only one cell like brewer's yeast or diatom, an algae. Multicellular eukaryotes are organisms whose cells have a nucleus enclosed within a nuclear envelope. Is that right, Drive? Sue? Ian interjected. Yes, that's right, Ian. The domain eukaryote makes up one of the 3 domains of life, the prokaryotes. Bacteria and archaea make up the other 2 domains. Eukaryotes can reproduce both asexually through mitosis and sexually through meiosis and gamete fusion. In mitosis, one cell divides to produce two genetically identical cells. In meiosis, DNA replication is followed by 2 rounds of cell division to produce 4 haploid daughter cells. They act as sex cells or gametes. Each gamete has just one set of chromosomes, each a unique mix of the corresponding pair of parental chromosomes resulting from genetic recombination during meiosis. Ian asked, isn't that what happens in the mosquito's gut to convert the pathogen to a disease that can infect humans? We spoke of that when we were in Africa. That's exactly right, Ian. A new protein known as GCS1, a generative cell-specific one, suggests that it may perform an essential function in cell division, such as the membrane fusion at the moment DNA is passed on. If GCS1 is indeed an important part of our ancestral gamete fusion apparatus, that might suggest that complex, multicellular organisms have invented novel forms of gamete fusion. However, seeing this was more information than most of us needed, she returned to the topic that got us there. The cell structure of bacteria is simpler than that of other organisms because there is no nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. Instead, their control center, containing their genetic information, is contained in a single loop of DNA. Some bacteria have an extra circle of genetic material called the plasmid. The plasmid often contains genes that give the bacterium some advantage over other bacteria. For example, it may contain a gene that makes the bacterium resistant to a certain antibiotic. How many different types of bacteria are there, Sue? Dick asked. Bacteria are classified into 5 groups according to their basic shapes: the spherical or kochi, rod known as bacilli, then spiral or spirilla, comma known as vibrios, and finally corkscrew or spirochetes. They can exist as single cells, in pairs, chains, or clusters. In all, there are over 30,000 named species of bacteria. Bacteria reproduce by binary fission. In that process, the bacterium, which is a single cell, divides into 2 identical daughter cells. Binary fission begins when the DNA of the bacterium divides. The bacterial cell then elongates and splits into 2 daughter cells, each with identical DNA to that of the parent cell. Some bacteria, like Escherichia coli, can divide every 20 minutes, so in just 7 hours one bacterium can generate 2,097,152 bacteria, and after 1 more hour a colossal 16,777,216. That will get you under the weather and swing your pendulum pretty quickly. Antibiotics fight bacterial infections by killing the bacteria or slowing its growth by attacking the coating surrounding bacteria in a process called lysis that causes the disintegration of the cell wall. Does that wipe them out? Dick asked. Some bacteria can form endospores that are extremely resistant to hostile conditions, so eradicating them is very difficult. Endospore-producing bacteria can be nasty pathogens like Bacillus anthracis. The cause of anthrax, she told us. Ian interjected, phages are being used to treat bacterial infections that don't respond to some methods. A bacteriophage is a virus that infects and replicates within bacteria and archaea to devour them. What are archaea? Marion queried. Archaea are single-celled microorganisms with a structure similar to bacteria. They're evolutionarily distinct from bacteria and eukaryotes and form the 3rd domain of life. Archaea are obligate anaerobes living in low oxygen, and these microorganisms can be killed by normal atmospheric concentrations of oxygen. Fish out of water, so to speak. Phages are a form of viruses which attach to bacterial cells and inject a viral genome into the cell. The viral genome effectively replaces the bacterial genome, halting the bacterial infection. The bacterial cell causing the infection is unable to reproduce and instead produces additional phages. Pop. Jack in the box, only this one is going to eat you. Marion said with a flourish of the hands. What's the downside of phages? I asked. Phages are very selective in the strains of bacteria they are effective against. Dr. Sue replied, just as mosquitoes are selective of the pathogens they can pick up. Sniper shot, Dick said as he focused his imaginary rifle and pulled the trigger. She continued, but they have lots of advantages, including reduced side effects and reduced risk of the bacteriums developing resistance. Phages are more successful than antibiotics, where there is a biofilm covered by a polysaccharide layer which antibiotics can't penetrate. Virulent phages can be isolated much quicker than other compounds or natural products and isolated from the environment with ease. Development of standardized manufacturing processes would make lab-to-clinic delivery of phages much quicker than traditional medicine. Phages are typically harmless to the host organism and other beneficial bacteria such as gut microbiota, thereby reducing the chance of an opportunistic infection. A phage will only kill a bacterium if it matches the specific strain on its bounty poster, Dick said. Consequently, phage mixtures and cocktails are often used to improve the chances of success. She added. Back to shotgun, Dick said. Alternatively, samples taken from recovering patients can contain appropriate phages to be grown to cure other patients infected with the same strain. Bacteriophages are found wherever bacteria thrive, such as sewers, waste runoff pipes, and even the stools of convalescing patients. Why hasn't anyone pursued this line before? Marius asked. Pathogenic bacterial infections were mostly cured by the antibiotic penicillin G, so leading Western scientists lost interest. Russian scientists have continued to develop phage therapy with an extensive library and research center at the George Eliaver Institute in Tbilisi, Georgia. We might want to look there as well if we can, should we find a good lead here. Just as bacteria can evolve resistance, viruses can evolve to overcome resistance. The fight's on now, Dick announced. Uncle Sandu interjected, we should look at this from two perspectives. Firstly, we have a great deal of documented information in our diaries that may lead us to people of interest. These types of cures were typically developed in the rural communities where the circus spends all of its time. We can see if any entries from that time can lead us to more concrete information. Marius, you and I will check those. To which Marius nodded. He continued, next, the archives in the basement hold many documents with Soviet information unknown to the West. I would estimate 50% of the content in the basement is Soviet, based on the last owner of the item. Marion knows the area well and will help direct your search to the most likely locations. The basement is a vast series of rooms and tunnels with lower light than elsewhere and no windows. Make sure you are prepared with gloves, masks, and lights. Additionally, we should have Florin follow up with any family contacts in Georgia. We may need some specific information or even samples of a particular phage. They may have also made advances that are unpublished. The rest of that day searching the basement was fruitless for me as far as our quest was concerned, but there were many interesting things found along the way. The Jacks, Cheesy and I met up with Darla, Magda and Krista on the terrace that evening to have a few drinks and learn about magic and the metaphysical world from their perspective. Of course, Darla brought Mr. Whiskers, Magda brought Peepers and Thief flew about looking for things to steal. He swooped down on the table and picked up a straw that had been abandoned. Stop thief! Yelled Krista. That gets her in a lot of trouble in town. All the cute young cops that have been watching her seized the opportunity to come to her aid. Darla said. That's not true. If there's a cute fireman or paramedic, they might come too. Krista responded and everyone laughed, but I'm sure that was true. The moon shone brightly on what was another crystal clear night in the Carpathian Mountains with a fresh breeze blowing the forest aromas to our scent. There was just enough breeze to sway the treetops in the brilliant moonlight and replace the summer heat. Darla, can you tell our friends something of the 7 artes magicae or artes prohibitae? Marion asked. Darla replied, you know if they're the forbidden arts, I'm going to find them. And everyone laughed as hard as they knew Darla. Obviously, there were some family secrets after all. Let's start with hydromancy, a form of divination using water,